Hey, Gotham Outsiders! You may have noticed this episode is coming out earlier than expected. We've had such an outpouring of support from all of you, as well as some amazing guests that have been willing to come on and been excited to talk to us about Batman, that we have decided to go bi-weekly, coming out every other week instead of semi-monthly. So you're going to see episodes from us every other week instead. I hope you're as excited as I am to dive even deeper into Batman with even more people. Please keep giving us all that support, and we'll keep coming to you at this bi-weekly rate. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of Gotham Outsiders, our Batman book club. I am putting question marks on my ransom notes. Your host, Chris, a Batman obsessive. And with me, staring moodily out a window with mascara on his eyes, is my co-host, TJ.
I'm TJ, your Chris-proclaimed Batman acolyte.
And what do we hear over our shared comms oracle like? A guest this week. With us, we have Ben Kahn, writer of Griffin, Renegade Rule, Shaman, and Heavenly Blues, and person most likely to slide into my DMs with thoughts on Hannibal, Ben!
Hello! Yes, thank you for having me on, and for being my funny murder show buddy.
I am always here for murder. We are so glad you're here, and we're going to talk about a lot of murder today, actually.
Yes, we are talking about a book very near and dear to my heart.
And very near and dear to murder.
Yes. Batman and Robin, Batman Reborn by Grant Morrison, Volume 1.
With art by Frank Quitely and Philip Tan.
And one of those is superior to the other, in my opinion.
The art or the person? Are you rating the people?
I don't know them personally, so I'm gonna have to do it off the artwork.
Okay. I was very curious for a second there. All right, so off the bat, I have some questions that we are going to start off with to let our audience get to know you, Ben.
All
and
right.
I'm also going to force TJ to answer them because he doesn't know as much about Batman as I do.
I was not aware of this.
I
know. Okay, I'm ready. Ben, are you ready?
Purpose.
I'm ready.
All right.
We'll see who wins. It's a very unfair competition.
This is a competition.
Oh,
okay.
Don't worry, Ben. TJ doesn't know anything about Batman, so you're fine.
Hey, I know basic Batman.
Yes, your knowledge is basic. I agree. All right. This one, to be fair, there is no winner of this question unless you say the very wrong answer. Who is your Bat family OTP?
I'll go first.
Ooh.
Does Harley Quinn count? I ask this like every episode.
You do ask this every episode, and she continues to count every episode.
Okay, so Harley and Ivy. I also just really want to name Midnighter and Dick Grayson.
Ooh. Oh, wow. You know you got me in the heart with that answer. Ben, how about you?
Call me a sucker for the classics, but my big superhero comics OTP has always been Batman and Catwoman.
Oof, that is a classic, and both of those were the correct answers, so you both get points for that one. All right, it's getting harder from here. So, based on the comic we read today, where's Bruce Wayne?
He's dead. He faked his death.
He is not dead. He has been hit by the Darkseid's Omega sanction in which was in Final Crisis number 7, I want to say. And that sent him back in time, while also leaving a perfectly accurate corpse, which will come in Volume 2, which we're not talking about later, but is a very cool story arc. And so he is currently chilling as Caveman Batman, where he will then embark on a really weird, super Grant Morrison-y time-skipping adventure, which will eventually have Pirate Batman and Pilgrim Batman, and then eventually give us Barbados, which will then becomes a strangely enduring and cosmic entity within the DC universe.
Okay, Ben, I think you're just showing off now, and you need to stop.
I was going to ask TJ, who do you think won that round?
I guess Ben won. To be fair, I will make it clear, I have many questions about this is Batman dead thing.
this particular era of Batman is one, like, this was when I started reading comics, was like this era of Batman. Like this, like Batman, like one of the very first single issues I picked up was Final Crisis #7 when Batman died. Like Batman, quote unquote died. So really, like, this whole era is really like my era of Batman. Like this is when I started reading. This is what was going on in Batman when I first started reading comics.
Not gonna lie, I'm pretty sure this is the first Batman book I ever read too. I read at least the first 3 issues when I was about 12 or 13 and wanted to get into Batman. And I remember enjoying it, but then kind of getting overwhelmed and dropping off.
It is kind of an overwhelming place to start at. I'm very impressed with you, Ben, that you literally started with where you started and were not confused. That's impressive. No, this is interesting to me, and it's feeding into a theory that I have almost no basis for, that people's favorite Batman is the one they started with, because I mentioned last week that I like the Snyder run a lot, but that was because it's where I started. Scott, not Zach, to be clear. And it seems like this is a favorite of yours because it's an early one for you as well.
So
is that why you picked this one, Ben? Because it was your first?
I mean, it's one of my first. It's one of my favorites. Also, I figure, it probably wouldn't be one that it's not one of the obvious Batman stories that people might have picked. And I also think, especially like this era of Dick Grayson as Batman is just so unique and something I could talk about for a very long time.
Yes,
that was my favorite part.
Oh yes, yes. We'll definitely get to all of that because we have many feelings. But I have 2 more very important questions that our audience need to know the answer. What's Jason's real hair color?
Apparently, it's red.
It's whatever the fuck the multiverse feels like it is on this particular reboot.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's red with a streak of white in it.
You're still wrong, and Ben got it right. So I deep dove on this today.
Oh yeah.
Like, yeah. Did you also, or did you already know?
Oh no, I am acquainted with the history of Jason Todd's hair color.
So yeah, so you can help me fill TJ in because it was a saga. It was a whole thing.
It's very silly.
There was a point where I was reading this book and I wrote Chris and I said, "What? Jason has red hair? How did I not know this?" And I said, "Does this mean he canonically just dyes his hair all the time?" I was like, we already knew he was bi, but
there is a lot of meta narrative going on with the Red Hood arc.
It really is.
Go
ahead.
I mean, just like, because when I read this, it was just like, it was such a cool, it was like my introduction to the world, and it was also just such a vibrant time in the Batman comics. I mean, it was Morrison at his absolute finest, just like really bringing, it was, before Morrison, like the Silver Age was very, very reviled. Like the Adam West show was not, did not have this kind of critical reevaluation that it's had. And it really started especially, because before this it had Batman R.I.P., which was just so dark. And
yeah.
And with this, Batman Reborn, this really is the start of a theme that's going to run through the rest of Morrison's very lengthy run. And it was his very successful mission to kind of redeem Batman's Silver Age.
Yeah. And, part of that, TJ, to fill you in. So from what I understand, prior to Grant Morrison, Jason was a redhead briefly. And he dyed it of his own accord. Bruce did not force him to. That is a new thing in this story.
And that's very much Batman is almost Batman's memory is almost like DC editorial.
Yeah.
Where this whole within the narrative, it's oh, Bruce Wayne was forcing me to be like Dick Grayson, when really it was DC editorial being we don't want an actual new character. We want Robin. And we want Marv Wolfman to do whatever the hell he's doing in Teen Titans, but we still want Robin.
Exactly. Yes. But then with Crisis, one of the many changes that came into the DC universe was that Jason became permanently and always black-haired and does not dye it. It is his natural color, apparently.
This is also when we started getting angry Jason.
I mean, Jason started angry.
Jason, yeah. Like Jason,
Yeah,
like, it's
the characterization in this one for Jason took me off guard. I'll be honest, I didn't think he was Red Hood in the book.
oh no,
Until they were like, he took the mask off, and I was like, wait, this is really Jason?
The
More
text that I got from TJ when he was like, "This isn't Jason, right? Is this Jason? Do you know?"
what was so interesting to me on like reading this was like on the hero side, so many parts of it have become like iconic. Like Damian Wayne has now been
Yes.
Robin like since this book came out. Like, you know, the whole Dick Grayson as Batman era went for like, you know, a solid like I think 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And even after reboot, it's like it's just so well like remembered and well loved that it's still like even today it's like a permanent part of Nightwing's like backstory. Like that's
Yeah.
a core of who he is like, no, this guy, this is the guy who can be Batman. He might not be Batman, but he can be Batman. He's not Batman because he chooses not to be. So like on the hero side, this has been such like this was such a defining role for Dick and Damian. And yet on the villain side, so little that got introduced in this like this, especially this like first 16 issue Batman Robin run really stuck around.
I'm not
Like,
gonna lie, we'll get into it as we talk about it, but like literally, thankfully, I
yeah. And like even like there's so much, and I think it again it needs to be taken into like a little bit of context with Jason. Like this is coming so quickly on the heels of Battle for the Cowl when this is
Mhm.
coming out, which is a horror, but it's like, but again, it does nothing in this arc feels like classic like Jason Todd or the Red Hood. And we can get
No.
like for as much as he defined to me, it's so interesting how like what other writers just were just like, nope, not doing this, throwing it right out.
Yeah, that's really fair.
So, Chris, you're not a fan of Professor Pig with a Y?
Oh, Pig sticks around. There's more Pig to come.
Pig is definitely the most enduring, but I just think in terms of like, you know, like again, to go back to the Snyder run, like Snyder like introduced like the Court of Owls and
Yes.
the Talons. Those are big, menacing. Like those were that was an instant A-list like villain.
Yes.
Like that is a story when it's like, oh shit, the Court of Owls is behind all of this.
Yes.
That's a mic drop. Nobody's telling their Batman epic, and it's like, and then it turned out it was all Professor Pig.
I would maybe like that though.
That would be wild. Like Professor Pig has found like a niche
Yeah.
as like an Act 1 villain. He's the villain who Batman stops in like Act 1, and then it's like, ooh, I picked up a clue on during the pig shit, and now it's like, sorry, poor choice of words.
No, oh no, this is an explicit podcast. Go crazy.
And then I found like, ooh, I found the clue, and then it's like, ooh, it's really a Bane story. Like he's an Act 1 villain, and then God, in Flamingo and that
Flamingo.
Red Hood storyline. And I feel like I'm just bagging on the Red Hood storyline when there's so much amazing things to say about the
I am delighted that you are, because I was a little worried when you said how much you loved this, that you were going to be mad by how much I dislike the Red Hood storyline.
Well, it's just like, I feel like there's 3 or maybe even 4 storylines going on or themes.
So much.
And if they had focused on any of them, it may have worked. Like,
Yes.
there's a lot of focus on Scarlet, a character so compelling she writes herself out of the story.
Exactly. Well, it seems like we're pretty ready to get in, so I'm going to ask
Yes.
my less.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Oh no, your excitement is bringing me joy, but I have to ask you one last very hard-hitting question. How do you pronounce Damian's signature sound?
Is it bad that I don't know what his signature sound is?
You definitely lost the point this
Yeah,
round.
I always pronounce it as
Yeah, that's how I like
Yeah.
it's really dismissive.
yeah, which I love that concept. Like Damian Wayne is just such a wonderful addition. And
Agree.
when I was rereading this, I'm like, oh wow, like the thing that I truly fell in love with this book for, because I had so many thoughts reading this a decade on. Like
Yeah.
when it was coming out in single issues versus not even just reading it in trade, but reading it like in all the ways DC has evolved, like the Batman has evolved in response, like part and the role this played in that evolution. But the relationship between Dick and Damian was so what made me fall in love with the book, like originally, and it's still all here. Like that's still like the core. That just is what makes this book just like the absolute delight that it is.
I agree. I think that's my favorite part of it. As we go along, I had some issues with it going back to this arc of the story, but the Dick and Damian stuff holds up for me.
Yeah. And again, it's not so much in that Red Hood arc, but as you get more into, him, Damian, Dick saving Damian at the end of at the climax of like the zombie Batman arc, or their whole like Wayne house Wayne Manor time travel mystery, which I love. I
feel like you should get extra credit because I apparently communicated very poorly that we were only doing the first 6 issues. And how many issues did you read for this podcast?
I think I managed to get through like issue 12.
I am so impressed. You get all the extra credit. It's not a class, but now you have extra credit anyway. I don't know what for, but you have it.
Extra credit.
All right. So we're going to move on to getting into the actual meat of the story, which is what we're, now I regret saying meat because all I can think about is pig. But we're going to get into the actual story, and TJ is going to take us through it, and we'll comment on it as we go.
Yeah, so my first note is, wow, this was a ballsy pick for our first book talk because Batman isn't even in it. I mean, sorry, Bruce Wayne isn't even in it.
And I was going to say, I love that. I love that about it because I feel like that's the ethos of our podcast, the Gotham Outsiders, that we're going for the weird here. We're not here just to read the main runs.
I mean, I don't know about you guys. I don't know if you guys had this experience, but I really did have a few times where when I was reading it, I had thought like, something like Dick Grayson specific got mentioned, and I almost got like a little confused and taken out of the book because like I legitimately forgot I was reading Dick Grayson. I was just being like, that's Batman. I'm reading Batman.
Yep. Another thing that I have jotted down here is that I found it so hard not to read the dialogue in Kevin Conroy's voice because that's what I associate when I see the Batman costume.
And I don't mean that as a criticism. Like I love that. Like I think it just speaks to how well Dick Grayson as Batman fits. Like the first thing I love about this comic, like right off the bat, like right on the cover, is honestly Dick's costume. I love that it's not the Nightwing Batman costume.
Yes, I feel the need to call myself out here because last week I claimed that I did not care about batsuits, and then I saw this one and I was like, I'm lying. I'm just comparing everything to this batsuit. This one is the best.
And I love the bat belt. Like that's such a nice little touch. But like, I do love that nothing about this feels like something Bruce wouldn't wear. And you compare, and to me, it's what makes Dick Grayson as Batman this like a natural inheritor. Just being like, yes, you can just tell Batman stories of Dick Grayson versus say the Jean-Paul Valley costume, which was specifically trying to tell like a story of a Batman gone wrong, or the big robot, the big like Batman mecha that Jim Gordon had, which is kind of its way of being like, yeah, he's gonna be Batman, but we don't expect you to believe him as Batman. Like it's its own different kind of thing, which was really cool. But for Dick Grayson, I do love that. Just like, nope, you're Batman. You're just wearing a Batman costume.
I love it too. I think this is skipping ahead, but I think my favorite scene is that moment when he's talking about the suit and how it feels on him when he's talking to Alfred. And he has that conversation about how he's still not used to moving in a cape. And Alfred talks to him, right? And Alfred talks to him about Batman is a performance. It's not a person. That struck me.
That feels like such a core of like the whole run of like to understand the character. And again, to linger just for one more moment, just on the cover, that I feel like that's become one of like the most famous Batman covers in the decade since this came out. Like Batman arms crossed, Robin like fist in palm, like in front of like the Batmobile. And I wonder, how many people have seen this cover and have no idea Bruce Wayne isn't on it?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, it's quite a ways into the first issue before they even indicate that he is not Bruce Wayne, if I'm remembering correctly.
I wrote down, like, if I went into this not knowing anything, there was a point a good while in where I was like, would I even realize that he's dead or that this isn't Bruce Wayne in the Batman costume?
Right. It's up until the moment Damian's like, "You're not my dad." And
right. And even then, like, if you didn't know Damian was Bruce's son, like, you'd be like, okay.
I did love the line, like, I can still give Tim Drake his old job back.
Okay, so now we're going to have to talk about Tim Drake for a second, which I have written down in my notes. That
I also had it written down for Chris to specifically talk about those.
Okay, thank you. Because, Ben, you might not know, though you followed me on Twitter long enough that you might know, Tim Drake is my absolute everything when it comes to Bat Family. And so the minute he was mentioned, I had so many feelings about it. I still am not quite over the way his story went at this point in time with him.
This is definitely, I feel like, a moment where things really started to, we're just like, this is where DC didn't stop knowing what to do with Tim Drake.
Yes, 100%. And I think this is an editorial thing, right? I don't think it was intended to be part of the story, though various writers have since made it part of the story, but he very much just gets replaced, right? I mean, Jason calls him replacement, but he is fully actually replaced by Damian in this.
It's true, and it's kind of created this so terribly awkward snafu for Tim Drake because you have Dick and Jason who so seamlessly and elegantly transition to like their own identities and roles within the Bat family and like the wider DC universe, and had their own, like, were really able to forge their own identities and kind of mission statements as superheroes. And then you have poor Tim Drake, who did absolutely get replaced by Damian, but is still kind of Robin. Like,
yeah, he changes his name to Red Robin. Like, he's clearly not over it. He is like that person who got out of a relationship but is clearly still wants to be in that relationship. Like, it's so heartbreaking.
It's like, at a certain point, Tim Drake feels like the person who's gotten like way too old and is still living with their parents, and not for like good reasons. Even though
he moved out at like 15, he somehow still has that vibe.
So my question to you guys is, would this story have been better if we didn't have Damian but had Tim? And if that was the case, how would that have impacted the story?
I don't think it would have worked at all.
I don't think it would have worked. I don't think it would have worked either, but I would have been happy to have seen him because it feels weird. He's mentioned twice, once by name and once just as a joke. I don't know if anyone caught that later on mention of him.
Yes. It would have been cool, I think, if there had been a real kind of Red Robin guest star arc the way that there was a Batwoman guest star arc.
Yes. I feel like, and maybe this is the fan fiction writer in me, I have always felt like it was missing in the story just to have any explanation of like whether him and Dick had a conversation about this, because it feels like they didn't, and that's always been the way that story feels. Like he just decided to go with Damian and never like talk to him.
Did you ever read the Red Robin series?
Yes, which basically makes that text. Yes.
Because that, I feel like that had the closest thing to that scene.
I think so, and I think there's a little moment that remains my favorite Tim Drake moment, which is funny because it's not in one of his comics. It's in Red Hood, the New 52 Red Hood. They have a moment where they have breakfast together on the balcony of Tim's apartment that he somehow owns on his own at 15.
Yeah, right.
Never explained. But
look, we don't want to get too far into New 52 Tim Drake's origins.
Too complicated. But
that had to have been erased at least a reboot or two ago.
I just like to think that because he had control of the Wayne finances, that he just was siphoning money off to buy his own place.
Oh, I like that. I'm talking about like, oh no, his name's not really Tim Drake, and he always went by Red Robin for some.
Always. This never happened. Yeah, TJ, they just change everything all the time. But the scene.
I do love to the almost surgical degree, New 52 Teen Titans has just been stripped entirely from like eggs canon.
Yes,
With
it's
surgical
so many
precision.
Things. So much about it. But that scene, I maintained, like, even though with everything else it doesn't make sense that it would still be canon, I keep that scene in my heart as canon because it's him and Jason sitting and having breakfast and discussing how they're like the black sheep of the family that like Tim wasn't cared about. And so even though Jason tried to kill him a few times, he reaches out to Jason because Jason also feels not cared about. I
did really enjoy, and I feel like you saw this the most in Batman and Robin Eternal.
Yeah.
Like
yes.
Batman Eternal, like I did really enjoy how like just how close because again, before Damian, it had been like Dick and Tim had that older brother, little brother relationship, and that was a big thing that then got completely shunted, like kicked to the curb once Damian hit the scene.
Honestly,
I did enjoy how like Dick and Damian becoming so close kind of in response created like this Jason and Tim middle child bro bond.
Yes. And now I feel like now that you've brought up my favorite ever Batman comic, will you please tell TJ he has to read this because I'm still trying to get him to read it.
In my defense,
is that Batman
on my
Eternal,
bedside
Batman
table.
And Robin Eternal?
Yes, Batman Eternal through Batman and Robin Eternal, which TJ has, but has not read. And we have been friends for how many years now, TJ?
So I read half of Batman Eternal, the first volume, and I have Batman and Robin Eternal right on my bedside, ready for me to pick up.
You know, Dick Grayson, Batman and Robin Eternal is what is like during the Agent 37 Grayson era.
Oh,
and
yes.
Which is, and again, when that was coming out, that was my hands down favorite like DC series coming out.
TJ, you would like Grayson. There's a lot about Dick's butt in it.
I feel,
oh, I know.
I feel so awkward because like I do feel like to a degree like a Dick Grayson super fan, and I love Nightwing. But my absolute favorite Dick Grayson stories are when he's not Nightwing.
Yeah.
It's like when he's Batman or when he's being or when he's being Sterling Archer.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I enjoy the Nightwing ones, but they don't stick with me the way that him as Batman or him as Grayson do. So I'm on your side on that.
I wonder if it's just to the degree of, because when you're Batman, you know, you have the noir, you have the mystery, you have like the horror. Like there's so much going on when it's a Batman story. There's so many Nightwing stories. And once Dick Grayson was Batman, he was allowed to have those stories.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't feel like Nightwing has gotten anything of the same kind of tone as like the Batman, the Black Mirror.
No. I would be down for that though.
I would be super down for that. I would be super down for that. And you know, again with and then with Grayson, it's just straight up super spy adventures, the likes of like I've never seen in DC. So I think maybe there's something to be said for when Dick Grayson is allowed to break out of like into other genres versus when it's just even a well done superhero story, just kind of like a straight down the middle street level superhero story.
Yeah, I think this makes sense. And in reference to this, TJ, there is a famous scene in Grayson where Dick is recognized entirely on his butt because his face is disguised.
I know this scene. It's from Midnighter, right? Midnighter does it.
Well, I'm surprised you haven't read. I'm surprised if you said Midnighter and Grayson was your ship, because like that would all happened like in Grayson.
It also happens in Batman Eternal, which you will read.
So I fell down a rabbit hole at one point where I was just finding the panels of them on Google Images, and that was included.
But
oh, good.
It is seared into my brain. Let's look at the villains real quick, because at the beginning we have Toad. I think he has a more complex name than that. And then we have Pig. So Grant Morrison seems to really like animal villains. And then of course at the end we have the flamingo. So I'm sensing a trend here.
I didn't even I connected the first two, but it didn't even occur to me that the third one was named Flamingo. That is really funny.
Yeah, God, I feel like it's one of the big recurring themes for this villain is they can't really do like they don't do conversations or sentences.
This is true.
Like, God, like looking back, I really saw, I'm like, okay, there are themes here. Like everything with like the Dollatron faces and like the mat, like, you know, putting on a new mask, like contrasting the Dollatron face with, you know, the Batman cowl.
Yes.
Contrast, you know, I feel like there's the potential, like, oh, the way, you know, Pig creates like his Dollatron minions, is this like how Bruce shaped Dick, or is this about how like Dick now trying to shape Damian? And
That's
like
a really good point. I had written in my notes, what does Grant Morrison have against faces? Because I'm reading this, there was just a lot of face ripping off action, a lot from multiple different villains, including the last one who ate faces.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that. God, and then Snyder keeps that, just fucking runs with that.
Why is this a Batman theme that we want to keep alive of all the things?
So I feel like with that one, I was able to notice, like, and really to me it was like the Dollatron face versus like the Batman cowl, and this forced to become a new identity, and like the Pigman, and this whole like this seeming like violent conversion and forced to take on a new identity versus this much more nuanced, elegant, and it's why I love that scene you brought up with Alfred, like the Batman as a performance. And really that whole first arc, one thing that struck me was like, especially reading it now, not as single issues, but reading all at once, was I was like, I really came up and going, oh, this is the pilot episode.
Yeah, this is very much Dick Grayson finds his footing as Batman.
They don't have the Bat Cave. They're going to be in the Bat Tower this time. Like, this is like the start of like Dick and Damian. This is like the starter villain they took down, but we got like the first, like, we got to see them at their worst, but we started seeing them come together. Like, we got to see the new flying Batmobile. And just effortlessly, it was like, I came with him like, oh yeah, no, this is it. This is the start of like Batman 2.0. This is the start of like the Batman who comes after Bruce Wayne. This is a new era, but this is a true beginning and true Batman story that does feel like season 2 in a way.
Yeah. Yes. To me, it felt a little bit like, you know, your old Batman is dead now. We're not your daddy's Batman. Like, there was a level of like, everything's going to be different. Even the color scheme. So that, you know, the Bat Cave is all shadows and darkness. And then they go and they move into this, you know, new space that's not dark like that at all. And the Batmobile that now flies is bright red. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of like, Dick Grayson is not the dark and broody Bruce Wayne.
Right off the bat, lighthearted, bantery Batman with moody, angry Robin. It's a dynamic that sings right away.
It's very funny. I have to ask you both, what do you think of this new Batmobile? It's very different than any of the other ones ever have been.
So I have a question about the Batmobile.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Did Damian build this?
It certainly implied that he did.
Yeah. Doesn't it seem like it? Yeah, there's a scene when he's got a wrench and he's down there working on it and he says something about my dad's schematics. I was like, they're flying around in this thing that this 12-year-old put together. I mean, Damian is very smart, but I'm not sure I would have done that.
I really forgot, like, because I feel like now they've honed it into, like, no, he's like 12-year-old Batman. Like, he's good at fighting and not being good at emotions. And I kind of forgot how starting out, it's like, no, Damian is supernaturally good at literally everything.
He's supernaturally good at everything except for having conversations and teamwork.
Yes. And also does need to be rescued a delightful amount of times.
A delightful amount of times.
Like, I mean, Frank, and I feel like I haven't talked about the artwork because, and to give Frank Whiteley his due, everything in these 3 issues is gorgeous. Like, and the way he works the sound effects in, like, with the scenes, like, it just felt so, like, it felt like I was viewing, like, comic art doing, like, in IMAX 4K.
Yeah,
like,
it was a different into the world. I feel like there aren't any other, and maybe you can point me if I'm not thinking of something, but I feel like there aren't any other Batman arcs that have this style of art. It's very distinct. I feel like I could see unique. Right, I feel like I could see any panel from this story and be like, that's from Batman and Robin.
And then unfortunately, the next arc, and I really liked Philip Tan's artwork on a lot of stuff. I think it's just
Yeah.
I think it's a very jarring style coming from Frank Quitely's first
Yeah.
arc.
Yeah, I like the first half art too. I'm a big fan of Grant Morrison's run on New X-Men, and it had the same artist there, and I love their work.
So they're one hell of a team, and I feel like, so if my thoughts on like the themes of the first one was like, okay, there's not enough with Pig, or it's not being explored far enough or explicitly enough, but I can really see some interesting themes and below the hood stuff, like, you know, below the engine, like some really interesting ideas and concepts being explored. And the arc is focused enough that even if it's not really fully fleshed out, I can still like pick up on it and like take things away from it.
Yeah, thinking of it as a pilot, I think, is really helping me here, because I did not particularly care for this part of the story, these 6 issues very much. They feel very much like we're just establishing things. There's not a lot of, I felt like, depth to it. For me, the Grant Morrison story that I really connected to was the later one, the Batman Incorporated. But that's Grant Morrison with his feet under him. Grant Morrison, you know, having written these characters for a while. It makes sense to me to think of this as like the pilot for that.
Yeah, especially because like very comfortable with Bruce and the world, but I think for as bold and as confident as Morrison's entire run was, and I think as bold and as confident like this, like that these 16 issues are, like especially when you get like nearer the end of the run. But for as well as like it, especially in these first 3 issues, it does feel like he had a degree of like this is a like Dick Grayson is Batman and a brand new Robin. This is going to be a radical change. I need to like slow things down both for myself and for the reader.
Right. A lot of world building.
How'd you guys feel about the lap dance that Pig gives Damien?
The disco pig moment.
It took me so off guard, and I don't know if I'm ever going to get over it.
I've never recovered. So both TJ and I have read this before, but it's been a very long time, I think, for both of us. And yet that scene, that dance scene, is the thing that I remember about this arc of the story.
Memorable and iconic and weird and what the fuck. But I do wonder if long term it's made it harder for people to take Pig seriously as a villain.
It's hard to take Pig seriously as a villain. I will agree. I don't know if that's the only reason.
Like there's a lot going on, but it's like, and that scene sure as hell does what Morrison wanted to do. But I feel like now, like 10 years on, like, ooh, I'm gonna do a Pig storyline, and then Red Hood shows up and is like, ew, are you the dude that did the lap dance on the 10-year-old? Like that was messed up.
That was
like it's like, and then once Jason says that, there's no more tension or mystique.
Honestly, that's true. I mean, I'm not sure there was ever any mystique with Pig, to be fair. I mean, I would have a hard time taking him seriously anyway, but you definitely make a good point.
And then we get into the second arc, and I feel like this arc, to me, there's 2 big issues, maybe 3, but I feel like that's a little like kind of wrapped into one. Like the first big issue is one we talked about a lot, which is like, this does not feel like Jason. Like this is very weird. This is not a Jason Todd that we can understand.
No. And I realized I meant to look this up beforehand. Is this, so TJ was asking me what's going on with Jason in this part. This is still does not have Soul Jason, or is that a later addition to the canon?
No, I don't know when that happened, but what's going on here is that like, so you had Under the Red Hood happened, like Jason was back, and then he did for like not terribly long, and that, you know, Under the Red Hood was a very good story. You know, Judd Winnick killed it, like did such a great job bringing Jason back. I still haven't read the comic, but I've seen the movie that was also written by Judd Winnick like about a dozen times. It's probably one of my favorite DC animated thing they've put out in like quite a long time.
Yeah.
It's honestly one of my favorite just superhero movies. And so if anybody listening that hasn't seen Batman Under the Red Hood, the animated movie, definitely recommend that.
Yeah.
So that kind of, and so we know from that really established this kind of like, that really kind of established the Jason Todd that we really have seen all the way through today.
Yeah.
Like, you know, that very kind of angry, brooding, but like, you know, defined mostly by just like anger, but not craziness, like with a clear chip on his shoulder, that almost like Punisher-esque anti-hero who both like is infuriated by the Bat family while also wanting to be like accepted by them. But what's interesting is like, so you've got like Under the Red Hood and that version of Red Hood. And then that version of Red Hood comes back pretty much immediately once New 52 starts.
Yes.
And that's like the characterization that really carries forward all the way through today. And I don't know if you've read, and that's really it's Jason Todd. That's Jason Todd.
Yes, that's what I was gonna say. I vastly prefer that version of Jason to this one.
And like I don't know if you read the first issue of Three Jokers, but I feel that was like a perfect portrayal of
I just read that and I loved it.
Yeah, I haven't read it yet. TJ has read it. That
was a pitch perfect Red Hood.
Yeah.
But between kind of Red Hood, Jason coming back, and New 52 kind of putting him back on track, things got a little like crazy and weird. Instead of going through like this anti-hero path that they'd set him on and then would later put him back on, they tried to make him just a full-on villain.
Yes.
Like there was a few years. So part of the problem with like the second arc is that it comes honestly less than half a year since like the last big Batman kind of crossover story, which was Battle for the Cowl, which was all about Dick Grayson taking on Jason Todd for the mantle of Batman. So you go into this arc and it's like, and it first gives you like, oh, this is it. This is the big Dick Grayson versus Jason Todd showdown. This is the battle of the proteges. So there's like, wait, didn't we just do that like 5 months ago?
And they kind of reference it very flippantly in one scene where they're just like, didn't we just kick your butt?
Yeah.
I love this concept of like the two of them battling for the legacy, but I wish it had been done a little better.
Yeah, it's not here. It's just kind of exists.
It's not, it's really more in like Battle for the Cowl, which is a story that I would love to see get like an animated version. Well, they kind of did with Batman with Bad Blood, but
there could be a better version.
There could be a better version, but really what it came down to was, and I feel like that was a story where the focus was a little too broad, and they had brought in like a little too much of just like the whole Batman world into being like, what goes on after Bruce is dead? When I really feel that story, probably the strongest emotional beats were all around Dick, Tim, and Jason.
Yeah.
Like that's what was the strongest arc. And like the arc of like Jason seeing this is like, ooh, and and his fucked up, like, this is how I become like, and this is when they really started going with like, Jason's fucking crazy. He's a full-on villain, which again lasted for like this arc and Batman and Batman Reborn.
Yeah.
And then they're like, we're done with that.
They kind of, I feel like it's in 52 when this happened, that they do part of that was just because he was missing his soul for a while, and we're not really ever gonna totally get around to explaining what happened with that.
I think that all had partly to do when it was still like Superboy Punch time, and then someone was like, wait a minute, doesn't Batman already have a villain who has a resurrection hot tub? Just do that. That's a way easier way to bring him back.
And I love the resurrection hot tub. That gets referenced in the end of this volume too, where he's like, why haven't you put Batman in the resurrection hot tub?
And that's the entirety of the next arc.
TJ, do you know about the resurrection hot tub, aka the Lazarus Pit?
I do. I have seen the Under the Red Hood movie.
Okay.
Yes.
And it's used in like Arrow, the Arrowverse. So
yeah.
I always forget the Lazarus Pit did that.
I like calling it the resurrection hot tub.
I mean, it is a resurrection hot tub.
Which is why I'll never actually get to write a Ra's al Ghul story.
So who knows that Bruce is alive? Because I was confused at the beginning of the second arc.
Nobody knows that Batman's alive. But Tim Drake has gone kind of like, well, fine, if I can't be Robin, then fuck it, Bruce is alive and I'm going to figure it out. Yes. Time to name myself after a restaurant chain. I feel like with the Batman Reborn arc, it's kind of like, again, like thematically, I love the idea, especially when they were going down this road of Jason is the villain. I love the idea of like, yes, the big climactic, like Jason Todd versus Dick Grayson. Jason Todd is such a great villain for Dick Grayson. And so I feel like this arc is brought down by, in that regards, it's brought down by we just had that climactic showdown a few months ago, and B, they don't actually have their showdown. We don't actually get a satisfying Batman versus Red Hood fight in this arc.
Yeah, everything just kind of felt like it ended.
Yeah, because instead of having that satisfying arc, Flamingo just comes in and like decimates everything.
He's just like, themes? What's that? I'm Flamingo.
And Scarlet's mask just like falls off.
I feel
and
like
she melts? I have no idea what actually happened in that scene. I was like,
I was confused about.
She drove off to wherever Harper Row goes to school at.
Aww.
I'm kidding.
Forever.
Harper Row will return. Scarlet will not.
Yeah, Scarlet's dead. She, as far as I'm concerned, she drove off this page.
I'm not going to say that. Eventually, somebody is going to be like, "Hey, remember her? I bet we can bring her back for an arc of Red Hood."
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, there was that whole thing about how the only character that never comes back is Jason Todd and
Bucky.
And Bucky Barnes. And what do we have? Jason Todd and Bucky Barnes. So,
and again, to be fair, Under the Red Hood and the Winter Soldier are two of the best story arcs of the 2000s.
Absolutely, and both bicons.
Yeah. Yes, very much so.
So, is anyone shocked that the old white men are behind the drug peddling in Gotham?
As always in all Batman stories, surprise, it was old white men all along.
I feel it's like you've got like your Falcone, like your mob families, and then you've got your Batman villains, and then there's just this infinite supply of just generic crime lords.
Just so many.
So many.
So many. I love that, what was his name? Bullet Nose? Who then got a bullet up his nose?
But yeah, I feel like this arc is just biting off more than it can chew. Because I feel like there's 100%. There's this Scarlet Damian relationship with
so quick
whales or mirrors, but also it comes entirely from Scarlet's point of view, who is the character that I don't care about. So I don't feel like Damian's guilt at not saving her, and then like seeing what she's being molded into and thinking about what he's being molded into, it doesn't really happen because it's told from Damian's perspective.
I feel that way too, because with that storyline, I remembered that part, the part of Damian feeling guilty, because that was the moment I feel like for me that I was like, oh, there's more to Damian than just a tiny angry murder baby. But I remembered it being so much bigger than it was. And when I reread it this week, it just happens real fast. And there's just I feel guilty, and Dick makes a joke about it, and then it's completely over.
It's why this arc kind of needed to be from Damian's perspective.
100%.
It felt like a half-assed attempt to make Damian seem a little bit more human than he was being portrayed here.
Yeah, Damian, I feel like they've not, like Grant Morrison, I don't think had found exactly what voice he wanted Damian to have yet in these 6 issues. He gets there, but at this point there just isn't quite the level of heart that he has later. Because when I think of Damian, like I said, I think of the murder baby, but I also think of the fact that he has a pet turkey and a cow and a cat. Like there's a heart there.
I think with this arc, it's just so much of, we don't see the story from his perspective. We see Scarlet seeing the person who failed to save her. We don't see Damian react. We see Scarlet react to the person who failed to save her. We don't see Damian react to the person he failed to save.
Right. He's almost like, isn't that girl I failed to save? There's like I kind of remember her.
Like, I feel like there's a version of this story where, again, like, Flamingo, like, momentarily takes out Jason and Dick for part, and, like, the bulk of the fight is Damian trying to save Scarlet and fulfill this promise that he couldn't fulfill in the first arc.
I would have liked that. I would have liked anything interesting to happen with Scarlet. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, and then you got and we talked about, and then again, so much of this arc is like, ooh, here's the Dick Grayson versus Jason Todd showdown, which that doesn't really happen. And then there's this meta narrative where it's like, ooh, Jason Todd died because fans did a call-in poll to kill him. So what if Jason Todd does a call-in poll to kill Batman?
Okay, Thank you. That was the part that I was like, literally, we have to get to, because I lost my mind when I read that. I don't know how I missed that was what was happening when I read it when I was younger, but reading it this time, I was like, oh, wow, I see. This is Jason Todd versus the editorial team is what.
And it very much feels part and parcel with like Batman, with like very meta textually talking about editorial, where it's like, to me, that feels very much part and parcel with Jason Todd being like, Batman forced me to dye my hair and act like Dick Grayson. Like,
yes, there's very much this, oh, you forced me to die by this way.
But
I also thought it was very funny that there's this sort of meta joke where they pan randomly to this woman that's like, no, we've got to pay the money because I want to see him naked.
That was my favorite part.
I mean,
that was the best laugh.
That's a hilarious moment. But to me, it's also like, what is this story trying to do? Like, what is this trying to do? Is this trying to be like, you know, like Dark Knight with the two barges? Is this trying to be like all people are terrible? Is this like Superman versus the elite? What's so funny about truth, just the American way? And like, and prove that people are more bloodthirsty and want vengeance, not justice. And I'm like, it's a funny moment, but I'm like, boy, I have completely lost whatever the theme of this is, of this like arc of this. Supposed to be.
I immediately jumped to the way that Twitter reacted when I think it was Batman and the Damned showed Batman's penis for 1 second.
Oh gosh.
Anyway, it's a very funny moment, and I'm with that lady. Big mood, lady.
She doesn't even know it's Dick Grayson. She's just like, whoever it is, let's see him naked. All right,
like,
let's do it.
Look, I don't want to see his face, but you know. And then I feel like the third theme they're trying to like, that is trying, and again, 3 issues. So you've got like the Scarlet Damian, you've got Dick Jason, and then I feel like the third theme, like you've got this whole societal, people are bad, like meta narrative thing. And then on top of that, you've got Flamingo, which I feel is trying to be this like, oh, Jason started killing people. So now like if Jason escalates, then they're going to further escalate. And whoa, here's the escalation. I'm like, it's a dude with a pink jacket. Like,
yeah, we need to stay on this for a minute because I have a lot of thoughts on this Flamingo plot. First of all, it did not feel like an escalation. So when they were, because we already had Pig ripping faces off. Yeah. How is this an escalation in any way?
This guy feels several steps below Killer Croc, and need I remind you, Dick Grayson has fought the literal devil.
There's even a line in this one where it's like Jason's been through parallel universes and punched an alien in the face. And I was like, yes. And that's why this penguin plot, I mean, not penguin, but Flamingo plot. Though penguin is also in this. All of the animal creatures are in this.
He does. And I enjoy it. And I feel like, oh, Dick Grayson, like, and it was I feel like one of the things that felt very not Jason was this media savviness.
Yes, I want to talk about this because I'm very curious on the note of what is Grant Morrison doing with this. The fact that he is like, you know, Jason Todd as an Instagram socialite, basically. Like, what is happening? It's so strange.
I mean, to me, it's kind of like, it's an interesting concept. It's like not only pairing more intense brutal methods, but kind of taking Batman's like, I'm going to be a symbol to frighten criminals and inspire people, like, and taking that and turning that into like corporate marketing and branding. Like, I think that's a very interesting idea and angle. The only problem is it's not Jason Todd.
No, it's so weird. I also remember the first time I read this comic thinking that, you know, the fact that people are calling in and it's like 50-50 whether they think Jason should just kill everybody or not. I remember thinking it was so unrealistic, and now I'm reading it in 2020 and I'm like, nah, seems right.
Yeah. Which is like like Jason's like the characterization of Jason has become like, you know, kind of the established, like commonly accepted characterization is like he's such a very utilitarian character.
Yeah.
He doesn't do the crazy circus costumes. He wears like a leather jacket and like body armor and like one little flair that's still mostly practical.
Not this like basically like Magneto, but with a Tylenol pill as a head costume that he's wearing in this
with
thing.
Like the big flowy cape and the skull on his chest, and it's like
there's just a lot going on.
I need to like inspire. I need to like get people. Like people will buy in. It's like Jason Todd doesn't give a shit what society thinks about him. He's there to like get in, kill the bad guy, get out. Like
it's bad
care about all this other symbol stuff. So like,
yeah, him going like, I'm gonna be the new sexy version of Batman while looking like that, really?
okay, so my feeling is like, if this had been like Daryl Tompkins, like former like soldier turned brand ambassador, like I would have been like, yeah, there's some interesting stuff going on, but like, and to me, I
Social
think,
media influencer as Bat-villain.
and this is the one arc where I'm like, this arc is aged because I'm like, at the time, again, it was like, well, 5 months ago, you know, he was crazy and dressing up like crazy murder Batman and not talking, just murder. So it's like, you know, maybe it's like he's shifted from that crazy to this crazy. I don't know. But now that like we've had a solid decade of very consistent Jason Todd characterization, it really does feel like all the more out of place.
Yeah, it's wild. And they specifically, Dick tells him to stop speaking in slogans, which again, like you're saying, it's so not Jason Todd to talk the way he is talking in this story.
Yeah, it's like Jason Todd is a man that definitely has not owned a television in the last 5 years.
What did you guys think of the part where Damian says to Flamingo, I thought you were going to be scary, not gay?
Okay, so
I blocked that out in 2009, and then I just blocked it out from like 3 days. I forgot about that because I'd blocked it out in the 3 days between reading it and now.
Right.
I want to dig into this because there is a weirdness around the way that Grant Morrison writes about sexuality in general. I don't know if it's there later because I really don't remember it in Incorporated or anything later. But during this period of time, it's very present.
Mine is like, okay, well, if it's 2009, if I, you know, gun to my head, I can't say I was like, I still had plenty to unlearn in 2009. But at the same time, this is the same guy who wrote one of the most nuanced and well done trans characters in The Invisibles already like a decade prior.
Truly, it was interesting because I have that perception of Grant Morrison too. And I pulled up the quote. So when promoting this episode, I mentioned that Grant Morrison said famously that Batman was a little gay. That was a misquote. Grant Morrison said Batman is very, very gay.
Yeah. That sounds like a Grant Morrison. That's very much that sounds exactly like a Grant Morrison quote.
I mean, he says the whole concept of Batman is a gay concept, which specifically, like he goes on to clarify, he doesn't mean that as in any way pejorative. Like he just feels like the character, while being canonically heterosexual, is a gay character.
I think he means, I think like the way that we use queer, that we now use queer in a very positive
I do too.
Stable. I think that's what it means. Even if he lacks the language for it, Damian's line here, I'm like, what the fuck?
Damian.
This is like when they use the F word in the Bill and Ted movies. Oof. I'm like, I was having such a nice time, you guys. Why?
It feels like because it doesn't even feel like it isn't something Damian would say as a 12-year-old. It does, but it's just that nobody seems to be bothered by it. I think that makes it stand out to me.
It's one of those things where it's, you know, and when I was doing Heavenly Blues and I'm doing like my 1930s bank robber story, I had people like early readers be like, oh, there would be like realistically there would be more racial slurs here. I'm like, I'm not writing the racial slurs. I don't want to see it in my comic.
Yeah, you kind of got to be like Grant Morrison.
I'll grant you that it's realistic, but I still go like, it's one of the things like, yeah, it's not that it doesn't feel like something a 10-year-old in this era would say. It's not even that it feels like something that Damian would say. It feels in character. It's just a matter of, I don't want to see it.
It felt like it was unnecessary to me because
it's so unnecessary.
Looking at the Flamingo character, he screams, I'm a queer character. So the fact that we had to point it out in the way we did is what kind of made it jarring for me as a reader.
Yeah, I mean, who is reading this story and going, that right there is a straight man?
Again, and it's like, oh, so it's like really like badass and gay are different. Like fucking tell that shit to Midnighter.
Yeah, Midnighter just came and smacked Damian across the face for that one.
So that's a moment I do not enjoy, and I'm
feel
also
like
kind of
there's-
impressed with my brain for like blocking it out
for
so
continually
effectively.
blocking it out.
Yeah.
I feel I had two, to be fair. I mean, not from reading it this time, because I just read that scene like a day ago, but from the first time, I definitely did not remember, because I also thought of Grant Morrison more as his like later, much more, I feel, queer affirming writer.
But that's the thing. That's what I'm saying. Like he was being super like queer affirming before this and stuff like
Yeah.
the Invisibles.
It's definitely, I almost wonder if it's more along the lines of, because I want to talk about this a little also, it feels like, I do feel like Grant Morrison has improved since then, but it feels like there's a little bit of toxic masculinity in this story that is not present in his later writing, and I wonder if it's more that.
Between Pig, between Flamingo, there is this definite hell between even like Jason caring so much about like his appearance and stuff like that. There's undeniably reliance on some like harmful queer coding in this.
Yeah, definitely. There's the queer coding, there's the your masculinity as the positive trait versus anything like femininity as a negative trait is definitely here in a way that I don't find it in his later writing. So my hope is that he learned since then, because it feels like he has. Like his more recent stuff doesn't seem to have it.
And maybe this is just because it's just how influential Grayson was on people's perception of the character.
Yeah.
And that one "I want to see him naked" joke aside, this feels like the least sexualized Dick Grayson has been in a long time.
Yeah, they covered up his butt.
They do.
They do. Like, I'm so used to like Dick Grayson's attractiveness just being mentioned at least once every 4 pages in every issue.
It was surprising it didn't come up. I feel like the only thing they even say about his appearance at all is when Commissioner Gordon is talking to the cops and he's like, wasn't he taller?
I liked how Dick was like, I hate the cape, that's why I got rid of it. And I'm like, yeah, like now they're covering your best asset, dude.
Yes. Yes. Got to get rid of the cape so the assets are showing is what it is. No, there's definitely that. So I have a running tally in my head, because with Batman writers, I feel like it's a full spectrum of how toxic the masculinity is going to be in this story. And this is where I piss off some fans, because my one polar opposite is the Frank Miller, which is...
Who's arguing that Frank Miller's relationship with masculinity isn't the healthiest?
The people that are going to be shouting at me after this episode comes out.
All right, so let's go around and let's rate this volume of Batman and Robin, Batman Reborn. Give it 1 to 5 batarangs. Chris, you want to go first?
So I feel like I have a more positive view of it after having had this conversation with you, Ben, than I did coming in.
Yay, enjoying things.
Yes. Like I said, I've enjoyed other Grant Morrison Batman stories more than this. This one's still probably a 2.5 batarang for me. I feel like it's a weak showing that leads into better things.
I'm gonna give it a 3.5 with I would say the first half is like a 4 and the second half is a 3. So I'm gonna say the volume averages out to a 3.5.
I like it.
And I'm gonna fall right in between you guys with a 3 stars. I would have given the first arc like 4 stars, and then the second one I probably would have given like 2, just because I really wasn't feeling it. So Ben, you write comics.
Yes, indeed.
What would you do if given the chance to write a Batman comic or like anyone in the Bat family comic?
Okay, well, I'm not gonna tell like I definitely have some ideas, but I gotta keep the cards close to the chest. I can't be giving away all the goodies. I always wanted to do something that really focused on the Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson partnership.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like they're the original Batman and Robin. Like, they're like, I wanted to see something that really put like, almost like a whole series that was just Batman and Nightwing. Like, what happens when the original Batman and Robin are back together, when it's essentially like two Batmen like treating each other as equals with very different styles, but like teaming up. Like, I just think there's so much interesting things that have been gotten out of like the original team up, like the original Batman and Robin reuniting at such a different point in their lives and having such a different relationship.
I love that. And being a big fan of your ongoing Twitter threads of slice of life comics, I'm curious, if you could get it past the DC editors, what kind of slice of life story would you write for the Bat family?
God, I think it'd be really fun to do like a Jason Todd story, like, but really just focus on like not so much the vigilante-ness, but just focus on him like living in a van. Jason Todd lives in a van down by the river. That's my slice of life.
I love this. I feel like I can't have you on the show without mentioning that one time that we spent maybe 2 hours on Twitter mapping out our entire idea for Aquaman Baywatch.
Yes. Oh, yes. Also, just like, I haven't read Gotham Academy.
I love Gotham Academy. I recommend that.
And I know there was some Damian ones, but I always also like the idea of like, I just like the idea of Damian goes to public school.
So Damian does, yes, he is in Gotham Academy, as is Tim Drake, and it is a slice of life story for both of them. So I definitely recommend that.
And Ben, where can our listeners find you on social media?
So you can find me mostly on Twitter at Ben the Kahn. You can find my work is on Heavenly Blues. You can find at the Scout Comics store, at the Scout Comics web store, or on Comixology. My series Griffin, Galaxy's Most Wanted, is also on Comixology. And then keep an eye out next year for my OGN with Rachel Silverstein and Sam Beck called Renegade Rule, about queer gamer girls rising to the top to win it all.
Sounds good to us. Thank you, Ben.
And thank you for having me.
This has been the second episode of Gotham Outsiders, a Batman book club. Next time, we will be reading Gotham High by Melissa Dela Cruz and Thomas Pitt with our special guest, Aliza Layne.
Aliza is a good friend of ours, and she is a comic book artist. You might know her from her recent debut through Simon & Schuster, Beetle and the Hollow Bones, or her online webcomic, which is called Demon Street.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Gotham Outsiders. You can find me, Chris, at The Myth of Psyche on Twitter. You can find me talking about psychology, feminism, queerness, and pretty frequently Batman. And you can find my co-host TJ at
Troyfin2 on Twitter, where I talk about all things book related and occasionally Batman related.
And you can find us both talking about Batman at our podcast official Twitter at Gotham Outsiders. You could also find us on Instagram at Gotham Outsiders. So please tune back in every other week for a new episode. Join us next time, same bat place.